When I was a little girl around 6 years old, I saw Bigfoot on my family's farm in southern Alabama, 15 miles from the Mississippi line in Marion County. I've never forgotten it. It scared me more than anything before that day or since. I was an active child, sliding down road ditches in that soft Alabama sandy clay, and climbing up into the barn loft and jumping out onto the hay wagon. My cousin and I did both of these things all the time, though I always got switched on the back of the legs for it by my grandmother. She thought I was going to break my arm jumping out of the hayloft, and of course, sliding down road ditches doesn't do much for one's clothing. My family grew cotton, huge gardens, we had many chickens and a smokehouse. Every fall, my grandmother plowed with one or two mules, which she harnessed up and guided as she hung onto the plow behind them. I thought she was the most fascinating person that had ever lived, and being the only young child on the farm, my grandmother always took me to the cotton field or to the garden with her. I didn't mind because I loved watching those huge mules, listening to the way my grandmother would command them and talk to them. Looking back, I suspect there was another reason she took me with her to the cotton field or into the garden. It was because she was afraid of what would happen to me if she didn't have her eye on me. Not just because I was an active child, but because strange things happened on that farm, especially at night. In addition to the whippoorwill that was very loud, I recall hearing strange whistling sometimes. There would be something or someone outside that would bang on the house, and the hound dogs would bark and yelp and go up under the house, and they would cry as if something were hurting them or trying to get a hold of them. My grandmother slept with her .30-30 Winchester rifle standing up by her bedpost. As a child, I never thought anything about all that because the rifle was always there. But looking back, I wonder if there was another reason she felt the need to have that rifle next to her as she slept. On a Sunday afternoon, I went onto the side porch where the swing was. I looked to my left down the barn path and something caught my eye. It stepped out of the apple orchard on the side of the path and it walked swiftly toward the house, looking directly at me on the swing. But it was not a man. It was something I had never seen before. I know it wasn't a bear either. It looked like a giant person covered in hair. I was completely transfixed and I couldn't move and I didn't know what to do. It's like time slowed down. Everything was in slow motion and I heard a voice in my head shouting my name and telling me to run. But the swing went forward and back and forward and back and I just sat there. I could not figure out what the heck that thing was, but I knew it was coming after me. I finally came to my senses and jumped out of the swing and ran to the screen door and right to my grandmother. I was hysterical and I was pulling on her apron and jumping up and down and saying, "It's the big hairy man, it's the big hairy man." And she went with me back to the side porch and looked all around, but there was nothing anywhere. I went to my great-grandfather and I climbed up in his lap and I sat there for a while. I never went on that side of the house to the swing by myself again. I never went into the muscadine vines to pick muscadines, and I never went to the barn either. I was so afraid. I did not understand what I had seen. Now, we had men in our family who were 6'7" and 6'8", and they would have looked small next to this creature. All my life I wondered what it was, and I never got over it. But I know now that Bigfoot are real. They are everywhere. They're in Alabama, and they're in Tennessee, and they're in Kentucky. We were on a hiking walk in a nature sanctuary that closed at sunset when out of nowhere something started throwing rocks at my children. It was a warning to move along. That was the time for us to go, and we left immediately. Now, my family goes hiking at the Red River Gorge in Kentucky, but you couldn't pay me money to go there. There was a couple in my community that went to the gorge and they camped out. It was a windless, clear night sky in the late summer and it was still very warm. A tree fell on their tent and killed them both. As soon as I heard what had happened, I knew that that tree had not fallen. It was pushed onto them. They were not supposed to be there. Be wise and never go into the woods alone, and always let people know where you are. Stay respectful of your environment. It's in the realm of possibility that these creatures move about in a different time frame than ours. After what I've seen, I do stay out of the woods. Thank you for giving people a place to tell these life-changing stories and life-haunting experiences. I think that these creatures should be left alone. That was a great story about her experience as a little girl. I can't imagine what that would do to a kid, any kid, boy or girl that age, sitting out on the side porch and seeing a monster coming at them that was bigger than her 6'8" uncle or grandfather or whoever it was. But the thing about the tree being pushed onto some campers on top of their tent, I've never heard that before. That's unreal. I wonder if the tree was green or, isn't that a freak accident? My wife was hiking with our grandchildren one time over in Arkansas, and they were walking up actually a mountain. They were walking beside a creek, and the kids were down in the creek playing and getting wet and playing in the mud and everything, and my wife was just standing there watching them. My son came up, and a tree branch fell out of a tree and missed my wife's head by like 2 or 3 inches and kind of nicked her shoulder. If she'd have been a couple of inches to the right, I wouldn't be married now. I'd be a widow. And she talks about it all the time, how close she was to that limb when it hit. And when it hit, there's no doubt it would have hurt her. I cannot imagine a whole tree falling on a tent while you're sound asleep. Just imagine that. That's horrible. Horrible. What a scary story. Thank you, ma'am, for sending this story. It's kind of sad to know you had relatives that died while camping with a tree falling on them, but the story was great, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you. Here is a story that a woman sent to me that I thought was great. It's going to be a short little podcast. I think you guys will really like this story. She titles it The Lurker and the Sundown Town Curse. I live in a tiny town in the middle of North Carolina. Our town is quaint on the outside, but it has a dark history. A certain organization that dates back many years is what put our town on the map in the first place. It is a violent and discriminating group, and unfortunately it is still active to this day in secret. Most would refer to my town as a sundown town. The evil ones tell on themselves, my father always says. You don't have to know they're in this group to know they're in the group. Their suffering will tell it all, he told us. When my sister and I were younger, we just kind of nodded and shrugged our shoulders. Yet it wasn't until we were older that we could see what he was talking about. Some of these people in this town are the definition of evil. A terrible energy lingers from the things that they've done, and it seeps into the ground, and it spills into the heart of the community. And for all the terrible things these people have done, this energy seems to come back, however subtle, for each and every one of them. You'll see a family with old money, and they're suffering. The families of some of these evil men destroyed themselves from the inside out. The children marry into abusive relationships multiple times. They buy and lose multiple homes or cannot hold jobs, or their children end up on drugs and they steal from everyone in the family, to the point that the family is on the brink of poverty. Everything they touch falls apart. As my old man always says, it's coming out in the wash. I believe that the awful things these men did have invited an evil presence into our town, born from their vengeful acts of vile anger and hate. Cornwallis and his men came through our area, and with them they carried a violent nature against the natives. One of the areas in particular is a highway not too far that has seen almost 400 wrecks in the past 2 years and almost 1,000 in the past 10 years. Every year it claims multiple lives. It's one of the strangest roads you'll find, but it's one of the most dangerous too. Many locals avoid this road for fear that it holds a curse, and I can't say that I disagree. This road was once part of the path that Cornwallis and his men took. There are several reports of cryptids and supernatural beings in our area. The most disturbing one in my book is nicknamed the Lurker. Those who have seen it described it as a lanky, white-skinned creature about the size of a human but emaciated. It has scaly skin, the texture of dry human elbows, and two sunken cavities where its eyes should be. It crawls around like a hairless sloth with disturbing long claw-like appendages. One resident in our town drew a picture of it, but it was too horrific to look at more than once. The individuals who saw it said that it creeps from home to home through a trailer park in town. All the witnesses who see it said it gives them a feeling of dread like they've never felt before, and the night of a sighting, they are afflicted with terrible nightmares. One man said he saw it crawl over the tops of the trailers and he could hear the scratching. Most residents don't go out at night. In fact, most people don't go out after dark at all in our town. There are several other cryptids in our tiny town, including some I've witnessed with my own eyes. I'd be happy to share my encounters with you if you'd like to hear them. Some will make your skin crawl. Thank you for your time, Cam, and God bless. Keep doing what you do. First, thank you to the writer for sending this story. I thought it was very interesting. The curse part of it was interesting. That sundown, if you guys don't know what sundown rules are in some of these towns, and let me tell you, you might think they only happen in the southern states, but it didn't. It happened all over the country. It's a shameful, horrible thing that people did to try to keep their towns. They were trying to keep their towns like they were. They didn't want anything to change. But it's a terrible thing that these sundown rules. But maybe sometimes that kind of meanness and evil brings on evil and brings on a curse on a town. And maybe that's what happened to this town. Sounds like it did. Sounds like it did. All right, that's a couple of stories. I had some time this morning to record these. It's 6 o'clock Friday night, and I'm going to edit these real quick, get them up, get them on a podcast. I'm going to try to get another one up this weekend. I hope you guys are enjoying your start of your weekend. I appreciate you listening. We'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks.